Alright guys, so there's quite a few jump hour watches out at the moment, but this is the first one I'm actually checking out on the channel myself. But the question is this one any good? And are you going to want to pick one up? So we'll pop the watch to one side for a second, and we'll quickly go over the packaging, because there is something quite interesting with this. So as you can see, it says Merkur on it, but this isn't technically a Merkur watch. It's actually one of their sub-brands. So they actually have quite a few sub-brands, some of which I've got down here. So if you're interested in them, I'll leave a link to the playlist up in the top, and also down in the description as well. So this is the Seizenn Jump Hour from the Merkur group. So I think it's a pretty good looking piece and definitely interesting, especially with that case shape. So there's also some pretty interesting variations with this one. So I've got the stainless steel with the black dial, but they also do a two-tone dial and even a bronze case as well. So there's definitely some interesting stuff going on with this. I do quite like the look of the two-tone dial, but personally I'd be sticking with the stainless steel myself, because I just think this case shape is pretty unique on its own. So now let's get onto the dimensions. So we've got a diameter of 38mm, thickness of 12.7, lug width of 20, and then the all important lug to lug is coming in at 43.6. So some really nice compact dimensions there. And when it comes to the weight on the supplied canvas strap, it's coming in at 68 grams. So let's start off with that and talk about that in a bit more detail. So you can see we've got no Merkur branding or Seizenn branding on there, but it is a nice brushed hardware matching the case, and it is really nicely stitched as well. And if we flick it over, you can see we have actually got some branding on the inside, and that is the Merkur watch group, because they tend to share parts between the different sub-brands. So we've also got a quick release, which is really nice to see. So if you do want to change the strap out, you can do quickly and easily. But now let's move on to the case back, seeing as we're around here as well. And it is a pretty nice one with that lion there. And we've also got, again, the fact that it's Merkur watch group. And it is a screw down case back too. So you can probably also see as well, we have actually got a pretty sculpted case with this one. So the case back is actually pretty much recessed into the case. So it just barely peeps past those lugs, which does help it to really sit into your wrist. It is really nicely wearing this, as I'll show you later on. But getting on to the rest of the case, you can see we've got a mixture of brushed and polished. So the brushing and polishing, no issues at all. And you can really see now that really nice case shape. And you can also see as well that really prominent domed kind of top hat style crystal. So that does actually account for quite a lot of the thickness. And we'll be checking in a bit if that's sapphire or not. So we've also got a signed crown. That's nicely done. And again, it's just a really elegant looking shape, I think. But now let's get onto the dial and talk about that in a bit more detail. Because as I said, there are some subtle things with this that you might not initially realise. So if we get a zoom in a bit more detail, you might be able to tell now. Otherwise, you'll be able to tell in the macro shots. So as is fairly common, we've got the concentric circles in that sub-dial, but we've also actually got them on the outer section of the rest of the dial as well, where the numbers are. So that is a nice touch and is quite subtle. You don't necessarily see it all the time, depending on the lighting conditions. Perhaps that might be a bit more prominent on some of the different two-tone dials, but I can't comment on that, as this is the only one I've had hands-on experience with, obviously. But either way, it is a nice design touch. So getting onto the rest of the dial, so I think the minutes are actually part of the dial, kind of embossed maybe. I don't think they're applied in the traditional sense, and we've got that really prominent cutout for the hour, and then just the branding below that, and automatic as well. So when it comes to that hour cutout, it is alright normally, but we do actually have a slight issue, I think. If there's 2 digits in there, it is a little bit cramped. So personally I would have preferred it to be slightly larger, but we've got no issues with a minute hand. That's nice and prominent, nice length as well, just touches that train track on the outside, which again is printed. And then we've got that nice pop of colour and that red second hand. So now let's test though whether we've got sapphire crystal or not, using the trusty diamond selector too. And no, unfortunately we don't. It is just a mineral crystal. It is a K1 mineral. So with it being a pretty domed top hat style crystal, I'd personally like it to be sapphire. I'm just slightly worried about scratching it maybe. But again, I guess it's in keeping with the style of watch, kind of vintage vibes. But let me know what you think down in the comments. Would you prefer sapphire or are you fine with mineral? But now let's get onto the movement and talk about that, because you're probably intrigued to what movement this is. So it's actually the Seagull ST1721. So we just got a push-pull crown. So if we pop that out, you can see we don't have hacking. We do actually have a 40-hour power reserve though. And then obviously we can just change that minute hand. and as we do past the 12, you can see that hour ticks over as well. So I'm actually quite liking this. As I say, it's the first jump hour watch I've tried out, and it's just something a bit different. And then if we pop the crown back in, we've also got hand winding as well. All works well. Pretty basic movement, but does the job. So now that's out of the way, you're probably wondering to yourself, has this got any lume? And if it has, is it any good? So let's check that out now. So as you can see, we've got a little bit already, but let's charge it up, give it a proper chance. And there we go. So they don't actually specify what the lume is on the listing, but going by the colour, I imagine it's something like C3, but you can see straight away there is quite a discrepancy between the hand and the indices, which is kind of to be expected really. As I said, they aren't applied indices in the traditional sense, they are kind of integrated into the dial. But you've probably already noticed we can't really use this at night anyway for one big reason, and that is we don't have any lume on that hour at all. So they definitely could have added that. We've seen date wheels before which are lumed, so with this hour one, it needed to be lumed really if you're going to lume everything else. So a little disappointing, but we'll go over the rest of the lume and you'll see the rest of it isn't great anyway. So it does fade pretty quickly, so it isn't really an issue I guess. It's not really all that usable, even if it was the loomed hour as well. So all that's left to do now is show you what it's like on wrist, go over the pros and cons, and then you can decide whether you want to pick one of these up or not. And here it is on my 7-inch wrist. So as I said, wears really nicely. This strap is actually surprisingly comfortable, and I do like this added detail on the holes so you know it's not going to fray, and also the matching hardware on there as well. But the standout is definitely this case. As I say, it's a really nice case shape, nice compact lugs, and as I mentioned earlier, that sculpted case with the recessed case back just sinks into your wrist and wears beautifully. So if you do like this case shape, but you're not keen on the Jump Hour watch, they do actually do some different ones with this case shape. So I'll leave a link to one of them, again, down in the description in the playlist, and you'll be able to see which ones it is. So when it comes to the issues, you've probably already figured out what they are. I've mentioned them throughout the review. So first up is that hour window. It is a touch on the tight side when there's 2 digits in there, just to make that slightly bigger. And the only other real one is the lume. If you're going to bother going to the trouble of actually adding lume, add it so it's actually usable. So more on the indices and a tiny bit more on the hand, but mainly on that hour window, so it is actually usable at night. Or perhaps just get rid of the lume altogether and maybe just add that budget to add in sapphire crystal instead. I'd personally be going for that one I think, but let me know down in the comments, what would you prefer? Those little niggles aside though, I think I'd recommend this watch overall. If you're after something a bit different and you like this design and this case shape, I think it's worth it, as long as those things I mentioned aren't deal breakers for you though. So if you are still interested in picking one up, links down in the description as always. That is an affiliate link, does help support the channel, but you don't pay any extra. But that's it for this one guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.